What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast. This is episode 272. Today, our guest is Adam Hernandez. This is his second time coming around on the podcast, but this time he's coming on to discuss what he will do if he's elected for mayor. I really hope you guys enjoy the episode and really take in what he's saying. And more importantly, I hope you guys go out and vote if you live in Lubbock and you're registered to vote, which will be May 4th for the mayor spot, a few city council spots, other things like that, Proposition A as well. But also, I will clip two parts that I felt were important and also upload those to YouTube, and those will be a little bit shorter clips compared to this hour and a half some odd podcast. So if you want to just see like some main topics we talked about, those will be on the YouTube channel, because we did ask people what they felt like, what they wanted to hear, and these two things came up. So, more than these two things, but these were pretty important to people. So, hope you guys at least check those out, or, check out the whole episode. Other than that, guys, if you're new to the podcast, please subscribe to us on YouTube, on the YouTube channel. It's free. It's an easy way, and it's free. So, I don't know. And we're also on Patreon, patreon.com/snakepitstudios, where you can subscribe to the Conversation Pit for $1. We're getting more people, so tell your friends about it. Rate, review, subscribe, share the post, and go out and vote. Other than that, guys, thank you. But we're here with Adam for the second time, man. I'm excited to talk to you. Last time you came on was about Freedom Act, pretty much. Now we get into your campaign and the whole mayor talk.
Yeah.
Let me just say this. It has been a supercharged subject on the Snake Pit. Something I was not even expecting.
Okay.
But I'm excited to talk to you and get a different perspective from the other guy.
All right.
And we're here. I really want to ask you, I want to know what your answer to this is. What is the job of a mayor? What does that mean?
Sure. So the job of the mayor, first and foremost, the job of the city council is public health and safety. That's the first job of the council, right? So making sure that we're creating policy that goes to public health and safety, right? The other thing that the mayor does that's different from what a council person does is actually run the meetings and can actually determine when the meeting time takes place. That's pretty big for me because that has a lot to do with accessibility and letting people have their voice. And so one of the things that happened that I disagreed with when this current mayor got in, the first thing he did was change the meeting times from 4:30 p.m. to 2 p.m. And I'm super involved. Like, I go to city council meetings, probably not every single one, but quite a bit of them. And it's tough for me to make it at 2 p.m. as a business owner, right? They can sort of do what I want with my schedule. Like, it's just not really practical for a lot of people. So that's a big one to me.
So what was their reason for doing that?
Well, I mean, yeah, to me, none of them made sense. And we stated that, so I'm not saying anything they haven't heard. But basically it was it doesn't matter what time it is. If people really care, they'll get here. And then there was another sort of excuse given, if there's a really heavy topic that a lot of people want to talk on, then we'll change the time. And that's never happened. As a matter of fact, when they had the vote for Freedom Act, they did that at 9 a.m. on a week. It was like a weekday. I can't remember what it was, a Tuesday. Yeah.
Well.
Could it also be a thought of, not enough people come to these anyways, so let's just get it over with and come at 2 instead? Is that kind of what there's...
So he actually did say that at one point, that, it was about the staff and not keeping them up there. The staff will really adapt to whatever you want to do. So, I mean, whether you have it at 2 or whether you have it at 4, the speed of the meeting really depends on the mayor, and really also what topic you're discussing. Because there's some times when you're going to be there all day. Because if it's a public hearing, which this council has done, I don't even know that they've done one public. No, they've done some public hearings. But the public hearing, you have unlimited time to talk, and then just anybody can talk. You don't have to sign up, so people can just show up as they come and then speak. And so if it's a heavy topic like the Sanctuary City for the Unborn, they were there for, I think, 12 hours or something.
Jesus.
Because there was I don't know, almost 200 people that spoke, physically spoke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're obligated to be there the whole time?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
man, that's a long time.
Yeah, that's civil service.
Yeah, there you
That's
go.
being a servant leader, like you're there to listen, you're there to take that input, and then unfortunately, what we've seen is that input doesn't really go too far a lot of times.
So if you're elected, how are you going to work with the city council?
Well, so I already work with them
Oh, you
all
do?
the time. Yeah, I work with them still. I never stopped doing my community service work because that's how I started. Like that's what I actually do. So I'm not somebody that's just running for an office just because I want a title or something like that. Like people ask me to run for the office because of my community service work, right?
So you're familiar with the bureaucracy.
Yeah, so I know how things work.
Okay.
And then also I understand that even if we disagree, I mean, I've seen the council like completely disagree on one thing and then 5 minutes later they're in agreement. If something makes sense for the most part, they'll be in agreement. There's also a factor of the public, the citizens itself, right? So yeah, I got to get along with the council and I can do that, right? But also there needs to be that element of public input and then all of us, all the council members listening to that input honestly and then making our considerations there. And I think that regardless of if any one council person necessarily personally wants to do a thing or not, if you have enough people from the public coming in to speak and voicing their favor or whatever for a certain thing, council people can be made to make the decision that the people want versus what they want.
Yeah, isn't that what it's supposed to be? What we want?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, because the city council, and this is the thing that I want to change as well, because being around City Hall so much and going through those processes so much and understanding what the real situation is, it's frustrating because basically the city council itself has one boss, and that's the public. That's the citizens are the one boss of the city council itself. And then the city council itself has only 3 employees. The city of Lubbock employs thousands of people, but the city council itself only has 3 employees, and that's the city manager, city attorney, and city secretary. Everybody else that works for the city, all those thousands of people, work for the city manager. All right, but it's the council that is supposed to give the direction to the city manager to then carry out whatever it is. Now, somewhere along the way, the city council here in Lubbock has switched that around and think they actually work for the city manager and not the people, right? And that's a problem. That's where a lot of this stuff breaks down, because the will of the people may be one thing, but if that's not who they're necessarily listening to and they're just listening to the city manager who may want to do something different, then that's usually what happens.
And he's appointed by the mayor?
He's appointed by this whole city council.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Are these problems that a majority of cities have, or is it? Because I've heard similarities with Amarillo and Abilene. Is that just something that most cities in the state, out of the state, deal with all the time?
I don't know about a whole lot of cities, but I can tell you about the few that I've looked at, and it depends.
Okay.
It depends. So you have a couple of different sort of situations of how a city government can be set up. And in our particular case, it's called a strong city manager, because the city manager takes on more of the workload. Mm-hmm. In another city, you might have the setup might be a strong mayor and weak city manager, where the mayor is actually directing a lot of what's happening day to day versus just the city manager, right? So like we have it where the city manager is directing the day to day. And so you do have some cities like that. And then in that, it depends on who those players are. Who are the characters, right? So our city manager is Jarrett Atkinson, right? Mm-hmm. So he has his own personality and his own will and his own thoughts, right? So he may be different from the Amarillo city manager, or they may be similar in some ways, but then he may be way different from some other city manager. So
it's going to be fun to watch, man. Man, I'm excited for this. I want to see, like, again, we talked about it last time, how many people, the change in voting, if there is any change in voting. Mm-hmm. Do you believe there will be in that 10%?
Yeah, so, I'm glad you brought that up, because I got to let people know, I'm 43 years old, and for the 43 years I've been alive in Lubbock, Texas, and I've lived here my whole life, less than 10% of people have chosen the mayor for the other 90%. And that's been our situation. And so in May elections is our lowest turnout. And so when you go back as far as you want to go back, about 19,000 people show up out of 180-something thousand registered voters here in Lubbock right now. And so it's a very low number of people. And then out of that, the majority of that smaller number has some different ideas than what a lot of the city has, right? So when you talk about like Freedom Act, right, there's a large part of the population that is for Freedom Act. And a large part of those people that normally show up, a large part of that 10% are against Freedom Act, right? So if they don't show up, if the people who are for it don't show up in enough numbers, it's just simple math. They cancel you out and they choose for all of y'all, right? And so Freedom Act or initiatives like it in the other cities where it's been done, it has been shown to increase voter turnout. And I spent a lot of time working at the Lubbock County Elections Office, so I have pretty good connections there. And we were asking them what they thought the turnout was going to be because of Freedom Act, and they're anticipating upwards of about 50,000 people to show up this May.
Ooh, dang.
So we hope that that's true, because if it is, that means that's a lot of people that don't normally show up who are going to show up, and that's who we need to show up. Not the people that are already showing up, that 10%.
They always do.
Yeah, whatever side they're on, they're going to show up, right? That's not the problem, right? So the solution is the people who, and you know who you are if you're out there, right? Like I knew who I was till I was 39 years old. I didn't vote. I think I told y'all that last time. And I want to apologize to the community for that, because I was wrong. And so that's why I tell people I was wrong. That was the wrong thing to do. And so we need those people who don't normally show up or don't vote at all to get registered and show up.
Let me ask you this. I need your professional opinion on this.
Okay.
How do you listen to people? I'm sure you've heard it about marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
I can't get past this idea that people see it as something like they almost think it's like heroin or crack.
Right.
Like, how do you get past that? Like listening to them say that shit, man. I can't.
Yeah.
I don't understand. I don't even smoke.
Yeah.
I still can't understand it.
Right. Yeah. It's pretty frustrating. I in the current situation with what's happening with the opposition of Freedom Act, there's people who are purposely misunderstanding it, and some of them are very smart people. They're very intelligent. It's not lost on them the data we're giving them. It's not lost on them what we're telling them. They know it makes sense. They know that it's right, but they're more worried about a narrative, right, versus the facts, right? And here we come with our pesky facts, right, which mess up the narrative. And so that's part of it. The other part of it where it's people that aren't necessarily acting in that way, right? Because that's not everybody. That's just those main opposition leaders. They're the ones operating that way. But other people that are just against it, especially older people who are against it, don't really understand why there's such a stigma around that particular substance, right? And the real quick history lesson. So weed was perfectly fine in the U.S. until about the 1900s. And there's all sorts of stuff we can get into. It was perfectly fine by everybody's standards. Nobody had a problem with weed all the way up until the 1900s. So what happened then? The Mexican Revolution was over. And when the Mexican Revolution was over, a lot of those people became instant fugitives and needed to get away so that they could continue life without being killed, right? So they started to come over here into the States to look for work and to build lives. And of course, when you get a bunch of brown people coming into the country, that's a problem, right? That's how they saw it. And so then marijuana, because they were bringing marijuana in with them, and they called it marijuana, right? They didn't call it cannabis, which is what we called it here. Now, while they were demonizing it because the Mexicans were coming over with it, literally at the same time, people all across the country had a cannabis tonic of some sort in their medicine cabinet, right? And so it started out with racial motivations. Then you get into the 1920s and 30s in the jazz era, and then the black jazz musicians started to mess with marijuana. Now it's really bad, right? Now even darker people got it. Now it's really, really bad. So then you started having this conversation around the country, and this went all the way up to the Congress. So people can look this up. These were conversations that were had publicly. And you can hear in those congressional meetings the talking points that were happening all across the country. And the talking points were that essentially marijuana was bad because colored people used it and it made white women want to sleep with black men, and it made black and Mexican men crazy for white women. And that's what the talking points were. And so based on that, they started to develop a lot of the drug agencies, and then the drug agencies started to put out propaganda. And one of those movies people might have heard of is called Reefer Madness. Mm-hmm. And in Reefer Madness, it literally, this is in 1936, somewhere around there, it literally lists marijuana as the same thing as heroin, cocaine, and everything else, LSD, right? And so they lumped it all in together and then just made it all bad. And then you go forward, you had the anti-drug bills and all that, war on drugs, all of that. All of that was heavily racialized during the 90s and all of that good stuff. And so that's why you have such the stigma, and they don't understand that those substances are completely different.
Yeah, I mean, I can get that, the older people. Mm-hmm. And what you explained earlier about the leaders now makes a lot more sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that's something I noticed. We had Tony Renteria here last week. When we got on that topic, there was almost like a blatant misunderstanding, you know what I mean? Or just they're trying to legalize, and it's no, they're trying to decriminalize, and even the amount, and it was just it was this refusal of no, it's legalization. We're but it's not what it says right there. You know what I mean? And there was that, and then I feel there's just a lot of skepticism with older people. They're just, they have this skepticism to the substance, so they're just no, it's a drug. It's just, it is what it is. It's a drug. You know what I mean?
So I asked him the same question. I guess I'll ask you. With it having the chance of being decriminalized, the other cities that have done it, Austin, Elgin, Killeen, Denton, and San Marcos, correct? Mm-hmm. So it's been, since they've decriminalized it, what I had asked them is what issues or concerns does that possibly bring? And those other cities that have decriminalized it, are there any problems or issues that they're dealing with it being decriminalized?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And there's a couple of sides to this. And so you have where we have a situation like we have in the United States where marijuana is Schedule 1, labeled as the most dangerous level of drug you can have, and so you can't really study it properly. And then we have spotty legalization, right? We've got certain states that do it, certain that don't, and then you have some states that aren't legalized, but some places that where it's decriminalized, right? So you've got all of these things happening, which itself creates a lot of problems. The way that we do marijuana policy in this country creates a lot of those problems that people will cite, that when they say that, oh, this is going to happen or that's going to happen, right? A better model, if you will, for me to look at this, to see it play out for the long term, and this goes into full legalization. So when you look at Canada, they've had it legalized in some form for many years, and they sort of held themselves to a standard to do a report over time so that they could check in and check on these things, right? Are we having higher rates of car crashes? Are we having all the stuff that people cite, right? When you have full legalization like that, you actually don't have those things. And when you play it out, and now the whole country has been fully recreational legalized for enough period of a time, you start to see that the black market actually dwindles as well, and that's less of a factor. And the reason why we have so much of the black market here is because you have so many of those holes where it's not legalized. They still have a void to fill, right? And then even within the context of somewhere like California where it's legal, you got the black market because those folks can't export that out of California because it's federally illegal, right? And then you got the fact that banks won't even work with these sorts of companies, right? So we create a lot of these different problems now on the local level. To get back to that, here in Texas, no, we have not seen any sort of increase in crime or any sort of increase in traffic collisions or anything like that. And the reason I think that is, and they will be doing reports over time in these cities, so we do have some of that data. But the reason why you're not going to see that is because it's not legalization. If you were going to see an increase in anything, that would probably come with increased access. Legalization increases access, right? Because you can sell it, you can market it, you can do all those things. Decriminalization does not increase access. It just means if you're getting it, you're getting it.
Yeah.
If you get caught with it, does it mean do you go to jail or not? Right?
Yeah.
Decriminalization says no, you just don't go to jail. Right? It doesn't cover how you got it because that's still illegal. Right? If you brought it across state lines, that's a whole different crime our ordinance don't deal with, and all of those sorts of things. And so no, there hasn't been all the bad effects, and that's because it's already here. We're arresting 600 to 700 people here in Lubbock, Texas. That means there's many more than that are using marijuana that just aren't getting caught.
Yeah.
Right. And so we know that. And so if all of this stuff was going to be happening, people going crazy and killing themselves just because they smoked a joint, or, smoking a joint and going crazy and killing a bunch of people in a car, if all of that stuff was going to be happening, it would be happening now.
Like actively.
Actively, yeah.
So with the cities where it has been decriminalized, there's been reports that they're being sued. What exactly does that mean? Like what are they getting sued for? Like,
Paxton in his name.
So Ken Paxton is the attorney general. There's a whole layer of this that's the state politics part of it that I don't really like. It frustrates me because I just want government to work and do the things that we expect them to do.
Yeah.
Right. I want them to get stuff done. And unfortunately, what we have at the state level is that's not happening. It's a bunch of narratives. It's a bunch of like all of these certain things that I don't know that most people are even worried about, right? So that's a whole different story. But it's very politically charged. It's very partisan. All those sorts of things. Ken Paxton is mixed up in that, right? And they have to appeal to an older base that gives them a lot of money. Mm-hmm. All right, and that older base we just spoke about on the right side of the spectrum, for the most part, is against something like this, right? And so because we have such low voter turnout in Texas, all across Texas, not just in Lubbock, and they understand that those older folks with all that money are going to show up and vote every time, that's the ones that they choose to listen to over everybody else, right? So you have that atmosphere going on, right? And so it was interesting because in the 6 cities prior to us, there was no action by the state. Now, here in Lubbock, Texas, we're very connected to the state leadership in a few ways. So Dustin Burrows is one of our reps here that's very close to the governor. You have Charles Perry is here, very active participant in the state government. All of those sorts of things make a really solid connection between the state government and here. So my theory is that they saw Lubbock do it, and then immediately after Lubbock did it, Dallas started doing it, and I think now they're just wanting to just stop it, right? Like stop cities from doing that, so that they can control the policy, right? Instead of what they should be doing, in my opinion, is listening to the majority of your citizens and just changing the policy at the state level, right? And so to me, it doesn't mean a whole lot, to answer your question. And so I'll explain. In Harker Heights and Killeen, Killeen and what's the other one that got sued? There's 5 that got sued by the attorney general. Killeen got sued by Bell County first. Okay. Now none of it makes sense because none of the city councils passed those ordinances. The same process that played out here played out in those cities. So they did a petition. They got enough signatures, put it before the council. Council voted it down. They put it on the ballot. Citizens voted it through. So that's the same process we did here. And so it wasn't the councils that voted it in. It was the citizens by vote. Mm-hmm. So if you're suing somebody, you're actually suing your citizens. You're punishing your citizens for exercising their right to vote. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't think it's right. Yeah. I also don't know where is that going to go, right? I don't know. So it's happening, and we'll have to see how that plays out. I don't really see it going anywhere.
Because the other person, I told him, I was just telling him, I was like, that's just almost kind of hard to I guess like if you want to defend it or whatever. I mean, New Mexico's right there, mm-hmm. all the way to California, all the way to Colorado, Oklahoma. It's medical. And then Missouri just legalized it. It's medical with Arkansas and then Louisiana. So it's all around us.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, it's kind of hard to stop if you're going to try to stop it because it's all around us. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. It's just there's a lot of challenges, I guess. I mean.
Yeah.
And the governor has the power to make that legal?
Not necessarily the governor himself. He would sign it at the end, but the Congress would need to act.
okay.
Yeah.
So how do the states that are legalized now, was it the citizens that voted for it?
It depends. So some states have a petition process at the state level, like
Okay.
how we did at the city level. Texas does not.
Oh, okay.
So you can't do that with the petition at the state level, because if you could, I feel like it would be fully legalized to this right now. Right? I think that would have happened a long time ago if you could do that process. But in Texas, we don't really like access to government processes too much, and so it has to be the Congress and the Senate of Texas,
Which is people we vote in.
Yes, and so it's the same process like it does at the national level. Goes to the House passes it, goes to the Senate passes it, goes to the governor signs it, and becomes law. So that's how it would have to happen here, because we don't have a petition process. But in some states, like can't remember the one, maybe it was the Missouri one. Some states have a petition process, and they did it by petition.
How do you feel when, I guess, like when it depends on your running mates, when they say that that's all you're caring about is just decriminalizing weed? I mean, how does that make you feel? I mean, is there anything that
No, I mean, I feel nothing. I mean, so here's the thing, and it's not to be arrogant or anything like that. Like, again, my work comes from dealing with the community. That's what I do in real life, right? Like, I dedicate more time than most people do to a full-time job just to the community in all sorts of different ways.
Yeah.
Some of this stuff people don't see. Like, not everything hits the news, right? And we still have ongoing projects that are going to help communities across the city in all sorts of different ways, right? That's what I focus on, right? When I go on a weekly basis to O.L. Slayton Middle School and mentor 6th, 7th, and 8th grade girls and boys groups, that's real to me. That's what I'm focused on, right? What are the outcomes there that I'm having? I'm not worried about who's running against me in a campaign or what are they saying. Now, if that's what they're saying, because I hadn't heard that, but okay, if that's what they're if that's what they're saying is that's my whole entire platform, it's just not accurate, because it's not even a part of my platform.
I don't think that's entirely what they're saying, Bradley, but
Right, but it's not even a part of my platform.
Yeah.
Why does it need to be? We did that already. It's on the ballot. It's not up to me. It's up to the citizens.
Like Freedom Act is something that's done and passed.
That's something
like
that's done, and it's its own thing,
Yeah.
right? My campaign is a continuation of my service to the community. And so what I've actively been doing disputes what they're talking about.
so yeah, what is on the platform? What are the community? Let's talk about that.
Right. So first and foremost, changing that environment up there at City Hall, right? You have to have a different type of mind frame in there. And we already talked about some of that, right? The timing of the meetings, making those accessible. But there's other things. I want to be, just as I am now, I want to be an active mayor in working to build collaborations to get stuff done. And I know what that takes. It's what I do in my community work, right? That's how we are able to get millions of dollars into this community or that community. It's how we're able to change a policy that was going to bankrupt our city and help with that, right? Like this is how we do it. It's not just me, because I stand up and people think I'm cool, right? It's me and a lot of other people, right? Working together, collaborating, having some tough conversations. We don't always agree, right? But we all move towards a common goal. And so that's how I operate, and that's how I will continue to operate as a mayor and be active in doing that, because all of the things that I want to work on, you have to have that part in place for any of those things to happen, right? So that's first and foremost. Now, as far as actual policies, so the big one, I guess, that would be at the top of the list is we have to get the loose dog and animal problem under control in the city. It's been like that for I don't know how many decades at this point. I don't remember it being that bad when I was even like a teenager, and it's gotten worse and worse and worse over time, right? We got animals being killed. We got kids, adults, senior people getting attacked, right? We had a man eaten to death last year by a pack of dogs. This is a real public safety issue. And the council has been uninterested in doing anything about it this whole time, right? So unfortunately, the plan I had the last time I ran is the same one that I have today. And it's actually been modified because I put it out online, and that's another part of how I operate, and people can see that in real time. I had a base of a plan, but I understand that there's people that know things or that see things from angles that I don't, right? And so I put it out there, got the citizen input, and now I've added a few things to my plan, right? But from that feedback. So we can get into the details of that later. But dealing with the animal control issue, that's a big one. Another big one, and this is all under the public safety category of what I want to work on. So dealing with the dog issue, making it safe so we can use our neighborhoods and so kids can walk around without being attacked by a dog, right? There's things we can do to fill gaps in our mental health systems. This is something that's very important to me because I lost my oldest daughter to suicide in 2018. And then the fallout from that with my other daughter, right? And having to go through the mental health system and having to deal with all that. And we don't have a facility for youth to go here. My one daughter, my oldest daughter, when she had her first attempt, had to go to Amarillo. And you just got to go and stay, and we're not even allowed to visit, right, for however long. My second daughter, after my oldest daughter took her life, we had fallout from that, and she's now had 2 attempts. She had to go to Big Spring, right? And just seeing all this different stuff from that angle and talking to a lot of different people. I spent a lot of time working with the health department and the director of the health department and collaborating on ideas for this, helping her advocate for certain things from time to time. And so that's something that's very important to me, filling those gaps, making sure that we have strong mental health systems here. The last one under the public safety thing that's sort of big that we need to get under control is our homelessness situation. And so there's some things we can do there. The last sort of bucket I got here is like quality of life improvements is what I call it. We pay a lot in property taxes here in Lubbock, Texas, and we don't have things similar cities our size have, like pools. Right? They closed 3 of our pools last year. Mm-hmm. And we only have 1 pool for a city of 250,000 people. Now let's compare Lubbock to Laredo, Texas, right? Outside of the demographics of Laredo, which is much more Hispanic than we are, outside of that, almost everything else matches Lubbock almost identically, from the size to the population, everything. They have something like, 10 pools and 8 splash pads and a city-run water park. Right? And they didn't fall off the face of the earth. Mm-hmm. They're not bankrupt, right? And so that it really takes the leadership to make these things happen. Another part of that is our parks. And we can make a lot of different improvements there. We can talk about that. The last piece to this is we have to, this is not even just a nice to have, but all of these things sort of go towards the same goal, which is making our city more financially stable over the long term. Because I'm thinking about my daughter who's 20. I'm thinking about anybody that's her age or younger than that. And what city am I leaving them? And am I going to leave them in a situation where we're going to be able to enjoy Milwaukee, right, and go to all those nice places? But in 25 to 30 years, when we don't have the money to pay for that because we don't, then what, right? Are we going to be burdening them with a bunch of debt and a bunch of expensive problems? Or are we going to leave it set up for them to where they can prosper, and raise their families here and do well, right? And so part of that, which the parks are a part of this, pools are a part of this, making more areas of our city more walkable and pedestrian friendly is part of that. And we have to do that part. We got to get there because the way we make our city for cars more than people is what's going to really bankrupt us in the long term.
Mm.
So all of these things you just laid out, are they possible in the time you would be mayor if you're mayor?
They're not possible in a first term, no.
Okay.
So city council is there for 4 years. Mayor is there for 2 years. So the first thing that I would do when I get elected immediately is do what's called a value per acre analysis on the city. And all that really does is it shows where are we getting the most taxes from? Where's our wealth actually at in the city? And when you do these analysis in different cities where they've done them, what you find 9 times out of 10 is that your older core areas of the city are actually paying for all those suburbs out there, right? So you're taking resources out from the core part of your city and letting that crumble, chasing, the property taxes from these bigger, newer developments. And it's just a bad situation to put ourselves in. And so you have to have that analysis to know where you're going, right? When you do the analysis, then we can understand, all right, where should we invest? Where does it make more sense to invest? Where does it make sense for us to make these walkable areas? Because when you make walkable areas, you got a whole bunch of benefits that come from that. But one of those is the economy. And so outside of just younger professionals who want more walkable areas, right? We have a lot of people here that are at the poverty level in our city. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of people here who they might have a decent job, or maybe them and their spouse have a decent job, but they're just barely making it, right? They don't have extra income to send their kids to FOR or Texas Water Rampage or some of these things that cost an arm and a leg to go to, right? Like, it's not feasible for them. And so you need to have not only amenities like pools and parks that are cheap for them to use, but you need to have areas where they can maximize what they're doing. Like, the ideal goal would be that they work, they can get groceries, and they can get whatever else they want within walking distance. Now, it's going to be hard with their job, but we can make more areas like that.
Oh. Yeah, because it seems like even now, because I've lived mostly in Lubbock most of my life, I feel like, yeah, you see a lot more people walking now. Mm-hmm. And I remember telling someone, I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing, because I remember there were like weeks, like I would be driving, hardly saw any pedestrians out. Now you're starting to see it. You're starting to see more people skateboard, ride their bike. Mm-hmm. But, like out here on the west side, I mean, it's hardly walkable. Like if you go on maps and, do a walking distance, it's almost like an hour or two away,
Yeah.
But I don't know. It just seems like I do feel like we should focus a lot more on, especially downtown Lubbock.
Right.
I feel like downtown Lubbock could be a great area if it was put a lot more focus on. Mm-hmm. But it just doesn't.
Yeah, and that's a great thing to bring up downtown, because this is one of the areas that's primed for that. Yeah. And that would probably be an area we look pretty heavily
Well,
at.
and on top of that, the population is growing rapidly. And I feel like it's more full now. I always bring this up to my friends who live in Dallas and Austin. They're like, oh, that's cute. You think Lubbock has traffic? It's like, well, yeah, not to that level. Right. But at the same time, it just feels like it's annoying stop being at a light 5 times, 5, rounds.
Right.
But,
well, it's like everything in Lubbock, like, it was like, well, everything's 10 minutes away.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Not
Like, it just
anymore.
was. Like, you
Not
could go
anymore.
across town in 10, and now it's like 15, 20 minutes. You know what I mean? So it's not excessive yet, but it's like a noticeable. We are getting fuller and traffic is getting crazier. The loop in Marcia is busier.
Yeah.
A lot. Almost, it's not even busy times anymore. It's just kind of constantly kind of going.
Yeah. And then, we have the outer loop too. That's, supposed to be. And
Right.
I mean, yeah, that would help the west side, but, I feel like there should be more accessible, like faster ways to get, to this side of Lubbock. But,
So I guess since we're on the topic of it, because, okay, so like what we did last week, whenever we found out that our guest was coming on last week, we each kind of like asked our like people on Instagram or Facebook, like, okay, so we've got these people coming on, shoot us your questions, comments, so we can make sure we use our platform correctly. But somebody, just since we're on the topic of like, I guess, making the city more walkable, somebody had a question about public transportation.
Okay.
They literally said, is public transportation on his mind? And then to add on to their question, they said, tech students that come here, and I was trying to paraphrase, but I really don't understand. Tech students that come here without cars can barely get anywhere in town outside a 1-mile radius of the campus, and no local would ever choose to take public transportation if they have other options. It should be so good that the average citizen would feel comfortable taking it every now and then at least.
Right.
Do you have any comments on that?
So, yeah, this is something that I think about. Unfortunately, Lubbock is a little ways off from being able to improve that a whole lot.
Yeah.
We can take certain steps, but a big part of it has to do with how you use your land. And that's what I'm talking about. When you talk about making areas walkable, another thing we need to do is make space for more affordable housing, right? We don't have enough of that. And we're not the only one, but we don't have enough here. And so what controls that, or what makes it to where you can develop that in different ways, is how you do your zoning. And zoning is just how the city says what can be built where, right? What are the rules?
Yeah, I remember you talked about
right?
this last time.
And so we can do things in that regard to make it a better situation for our public transit to thrive. Because what happens a lot of times is cities will do their land use based on cars and then just throw public transit on top of it. And it doesn't work that way. And the reason why it doesn't work that way is because when you have places where public transit works well, it's because of the destinations they're going to. And when you have increased ridership, then you have it to where those buses can be on a faster schedule. So like, they're right. Nobody's going to wait for an hour for a bus. I mean, some people do it because they have to. I mean, I've heard stories of people just going to do one simple task, one simple errand, and it literally takes them 6 to 8 hours on a, with the ride, doing whatever they have to do, and then the ride back, right? And then it doesn't run past a certain time, all these different things. And so what we would need to make it better is have better destinations, right? People don't want to get dropped off in a big parking lot.
Right.
And so this is another thing that we can do with our zoning. We can get rid of parking minimums because that creates a lot of problems. We don't need a huge parking lot. Have you ever gone to West End out there? Mm-hmm. Even during the busiest times, like Black Friday, all that, and you see all those empty parking spaces? Like a bunch of them are full, but you can see a whole bunch. And then on regular days, they're just all empty, right? Mm-hmm. And so how much space are we wasting? What else could be there, right? That's jobs, that's housing, that's all sorts of things. That's things to do, right? Yeah. And so we have to get there first and then adapt our public transit. But for now, what we do need is to expand the routes because they don't go everywhere.
So does that just come with an increased population, more people, those sort of things?
Or is that like budgeting or stuff?
No. So it doesn't come with necessarily more people because, again, we've created a lot of problems with the way we build our cities for cars. So that's a big, big part of it. And there's so much to that part of it. But like back in the day, you used to have really, really small towns. And then even in Europe today, like you've got really small towns. Like we're talking about towns the size of Plainview or something that have excellent public transit. And they come so quick that people don't even have to check a schedule. They just go to the bus stop and they're running, right? So it really is how your town is set up that makes it better or worse.
Mm. Yeah, I had a few people hit me up about things. I think one of them was the dog issue. Mm-hmm. Let me actually read it.
All right.
I know. I have people sent me a lot of. I just had like a series of things that
cool.
People had
Let's do it. This is the part I like.
Because I told our guest last week, Tony. I told him I was like, I really take this platform seriously, and I get that the big issue with like change not really happening is like there not being a lot of voters, and there comes like a lot of skepticism, behind that and stuff. So it's just like if this is going to be like your deciding factor of like if it's even important, like let me ask these questions for y'all. Yeah, you know what I mean? Yeah. So yeah, and some of them were just kind of like people were just picking your brain here. You know what I mean? So you might be like, okay, all right. But some were pretty good. Let's see. You've answered a lot of these already. I feel just with like you just kind of speaking.
Yeah, I want to
go for it. Okay. Yeah, go for it.
I want to do this guy justice by reading what he said. Mm-hmm. He said, "I've been walking a lot to get in shape for a heart and double lung transplant, but I keep getting attacked by wild dogs, and my area has become a dumping ground for people to ditch their pets." Mm-hmm. What will you do about to apply? Will this apply to feral cats as well?
Yeah, so my plan for the loose dogs and loose cats issue is first and foremost we have to expand our animal control facility. So it was built in 2011. We've already expanded it once since then, and we need to expand it again. Now, there's some debate about how big does that need to be, because in the animal services world, there's an idea that is sort of standard practice that you can't really just build a huge warehouse and you're able to put more and more dogs, right? Like that doesn't necessarily fix your problem. But we do know that the animal control facility is pretty regularly right now at about 300 dogs over capacity. And so we know where it's sort of a starting place, right? So figuring out how much to expand it is a detail, doesn't really matter, but we need to expand it, all right? Because you're going to add this second piece, which we don't have right now. And that second piece is we don't have proactive animal control officers patrolling the streets and getting animals off the streets. So we need at least one of those for every district. So 6 of those. And their only job is to patrol their district every day and get animals off the street. Now that's strays and animals that are owned by people. So if, I'm sorry, if you let your dog get out all the time, it's going to get picked up. But there's a reasoning behind that, right? Because your tiny little dog that's running around in here, that might be fine.
It's my boy.
Right. If he gets out, that's fine, right? But what if it's somebody's big pit or some bigger dog that's like not as friendly and can do some real damage, right? That becomes a public safety issue. And so they need to be picked up. And then you need to make that a pain, right? If when they go down there, we have a fee structure now, but there's like no structure to it. It's $0 to $94 you can be charged, something like that. We need to standardize that. So like maybe the first time it's like a parking ticket, right? $35, whatever. You pay it, get your dog. Some people have also suggested that when you go pick up the dog, that they make sure that you have it spayed or neutered, because that controls if your dog does get out, that it can't get another dog pregnant or get pregnant, right? And create more dogs that then add to the system. And so there's that part of it. And then those fines can escalate. And then in other cities, it can get pretty bad. Like, so if somebody's like a repeat offender, or if they like don't pay their ticket, like it could turn into a warrant like any other municipal ticket, right? So like you can have those things in place to try to get people to act right, essentially, right?
Speaking of dogs, I got this dude. He's eating something. Sorry,
no, you're good.
That with his mouth.
Oh my God, he's like, give it.
Right. And so so there's that part of it, right? And then the last piece of it, or not really last piece of it, but another piece of it is public education. And so when I went and talked to the director of animal services and asked him, what were the issues he was seeing, a big part of it was that people aren't aware of the best practices for responsible pet ownership. They weren't aware of like services that the animal control has, right? That some are free or you could get vouchers for or whatever. Like they're just not aware of it. The animal control has a program that they do where they can fix people's fences, right? So like if you can't afford to get your fence fixed and that's why your dog keeps getting out, then you can apply for some funds to get that fixed.
I had no idea.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
Right.
And many people like lose their dogs to stuff like that.
Right. And we can be more intentional with that, right? Like, so with these outreach campaigns, we already know where these problem neighborhoods are, where you got a lot of fences, right? With dogs. Like, there's people that call all the time. We know where some of these places are, right? So like you could even be intentional and go through there and offer that to those people in that specific area and just go area by area over time to fix those fences, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's a piece to it. The sort of 3 takeaways that I took from the public input were that there has to be a heavy emphasis on spay and neuter. There has to be, because there's a couple issues here. First of all, people aren't doing it. Second of all, it's real expensive, and that's probably why a lot of people aren't doing it. And so figuring that situation out and how do we expand those programs. Another one was enforcing laws that we already have, right? So it's illegal right now for those people to be in the Walmart parking lot or wherever with a box of dogs saying, come buy a dog, or we're giving dogs away.
I didn't know that.
That's illegal. But we don't have the enforcement happening, right? That's supposed to be LPD and animal control, and we don't have that enforcement happening. So there's other things too. So we need to make sure that those things are enforced correctly. And then you have the other sort of third takeaway I got from people was a part I wasn't even aware of, backyard breeders or what they call puppy mills. So there's people who intentionally just let a dog get pregnant a bunch and sell the puppies like as a business. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of problems with that, right? And so that's the issue with the dogs. The piece with the cats, we have one organization that does what's called trap, neuter, and return for stray cats.
They did that for our cats. Shout out to them.
Right. So Cats Alley Cats, yep, shout out to them. And so they're the only organization here doing it, and the city of Lubbock itself needs to be involved in that activity.
Yeah.
So there can be some collaboration between, like, I guess, private businesses and the government.
Right, and you can even work with all of these nonprofits in a way to where it actually helps the city and relieves some of the city's demand while also getting the problem taken care of. Again, it takes somebody with intention and a vision to do that.
To put
right?
these pieces
Right.
together to be like, you have a problem, I have people that might have a solution. Work.
Exactly.
There you go. While it's on my mind, another issue that was brought up was you mentioned it, the pools. Firstly, can you tell me why they were closed?
So the excuses given were that they were going to be too expensive to repair and they needed a bunch of repairs. And so what happened behind that was those pools were built in the 50s and they were maintained for a lot of years. But once in certain areas, and I'll just be frank, it just is what it is. It's part of Lubbock's history. When white people started moving out of the area, moved to other areas, the maintenance was not there for decades and decades. All right. And so I heard from a city staff person that dealt with the pools from their own mouth that there would be cracks in the pool and their fix for it so that they could open it up for that season was to paint over it. Right. Then you had a situation where you had all of the mechanics that make that pool work were from the 50s and they never updated them, never got new ones. And so now you have machines that not only can you not even get parts for, they don't teach people in school even how to fix those machines.
Damn.
Right. So it gets real expensive. And so another part of it was because the last council spent all of our ARPA money, except for $5 million. That's all they had of ARPA funds to put towards this, which is why we got 3 splash pads, because they were $1.5 million each. And the pools, they were saying at the time, would have been like $8 million each to completely renovate. And so that was the excuse given. Now, that would be fine if there were no options to pay for those. And there were options, and I presented those options. So the 2 options at that time, one of them wouldn't have worked, but it is a viable option, which is a citywide bond, right? People go and vote and say, yeah, we want some pools, but we're going to pay so many cents a year or
Seems
whatever.
like a lot of people this pool is an issue for a lot of people.
Right. So you could do that, but what was going on at the time was we had just passed I think $200-something million street bond. Literally had just passed it. And so I don't care who you are, if you just passed that big of a bond, you're not going to really have an appetite to pass another one. And then also with our low voter turnout, there would have been a lot of people that just voted it down. And so that wasn't really going to work right at that time. The other option that I presented that would have worked at that time, now granted it would have been a little hard, and that's literally what the conversation was with the city when I gave them this idea. They were like, yeah, it'll technically work, but it's just hard. So they just didn't want to do it because it was hard. And what that is called it's called a PID. It's called a public improvement district. So you can draw a boundary around a certain area and say this is going to be a public improvement district for a pool, right, in this area here. Now, the city has to meet a requirement, and that requirement is you have to get 50% of the property owners in that area, whatever that area is, to sign off and say, yeah, we're going to do this tax increase over X amount of years to get this pool. It would have been hard.
You would have to go like door to door?
Not necessarily.
Oh,
See,
no.
if you're the city, you know where, first of all, you know if there's any prominent people, right, that you can approach that are probably the majority landowners anyway, right?
Oh, that's right. I didn't think about that.
Right? You know who those folks are. And then if you need to expand past that, yeah, the city has a lot of capacity to go and send letters to every single door and say, hey, this is the city. We want to get your buy-in on this. And just make sure that you get that 50% and you're good to go. But they didn't want to do it.
This just popped in my head. Maybe it's not even relevant, but is there an issue here where big corporations, if you are they buying up a lot of houses, making this like a rent place?
I mean, yeah, but that's happening everywhere. And it's not necessarily corporations. So we, at least
BlackRock.
No, I haven't seen any big ones like that. What you do have is you have a lot of investors that are from out of state. Some of them are from out of state, but some of them are from here. You got people from here that own.
McDougal?
Oh, McDougal's definitely a big property owner, but they've been around for
Who's
a long,
the
long time.
one that just came? Is it D.R. Horton? Is that who that is?
I'm not sure.
Oh, anyways.
I don't know. I just thought about that. I threw that there.
Yeah.
My one contribution. Everybody else threw their question. I have one more question. I'll wait till the end for it. But
Okay.
yeah. So we had the pools, the dogs. You got any other ones? I think that kind of.
Literally, my
You have a
my cousin just threw me a lot of them. She's like 19. I can shoot them all at you, and we can just kind of like,
Yeah,
okay.
let's do it.
She said, What is your goal you're wanting to accomplish with Lubbock? You've kind of been explaining that this
That's
whole
like
time.
the whole podcast.
What is the big? I'm like, just listen, girl. Just listen to the damn podcast. What is your biggest issue or concern you have with Lubbock right now? We're actively discussing those. What does this mean for me, and why does this vote matter? I've never voted before. Like I said, she's like 19, maybe 20, maybe 20.
Your first time to vote.
Yeah. So this,
And then one more. Just
Okay.
put it in your brain.
All
Put it
right.
in your brain. She
All right.
said, "What is a quote or song you live by, and why?"
Oh,
I'm telling you, like, the youth have the questions.
a quote and a song, man. Wow, that's hard. That's hard. All right. So yeah, I don't.
Can I
don't
give you
know.
a good
Yeah.
quote?
Yeah.
You deserve the government you voted for.
Yeah, that's a
I
great
like
quote.
that. I like that
great
quote.
quote. Yeah. And so to her first question, she's a 19-year-old young woman, and I don't know if she's a mother now, but she may
She's
eventually
not, yeah.
she may eventually be a mother, right? And you may want to raise your kids in Lubbock, Texas. And maybe you don't even want to raise your kids in Lubbock, Texas, but maybe circumstances make you raise your kids in Lubbock, Texas for a while.
Right.
That's why it's important for you to vote now, because what we do know, and sure, there's a lot of people that don't know me, don't know what I'll do, right? But what we do know is that some of these people that are running have been, one of them in particular has been there for 8 years. These problems are still here, right? Like I was saying in the beginning, less than 10% of the people for the last 4 decades or more has been choosing for everybody else. And that's gotten us one type of leadership. And people on all accounts say nothing has changed. It's always the same. That's why. So if you want something to change for you as a young 19-year-old woman in whatever ways,
Latina,
right? And then thinking ahead to your family, if you want things to be different than what you see now, if you want Lubbock to be nicer, if you want Lubbock to be safer, then you might want to vote for somebody who's
Like that
aligned with
work
those
starts
goals.
now.
Right. Yeah, because like you said, I'm not going to get it all done. What I can do is lay the foundation for it to be done.
Mm-hmm. True.
can you make a statement on, like, help people understand that their vote matters? Maybe they're skeptical, or they're like me, a conspiracy theorist, and that the elections, I mean it's really easy to vote, right? It's counted, it's done fairly. In your opinion, it's all done pretty fairly?
Yeah, so Lubbock, Texas, the Lubbock County Elections Office is a model for the state.
Okay.
It's a model for a lot of places in the state. When they roll out pilot programs, a lot of times they'll run them through Lubbock first, because they know that they're capable to handle that and figure out the ins and outs and say, does it work or not, right? And so we have a really solid elections office here, and so there's no concerns there. Now, what I will say is, when you're voting for your president, that's a little tougher, right? Because you got the electoral college. So yeah, you got a popular vote, but you also have a smaller group of people that control who gets the electoral votes, right? So that's a little tougher. The state level, it's a little tougher too, because you got so many people that are all voting, right, from all different areas, that think all differently.
It's not just Lubbock.
Right. And so that's tough, right? And you don't really have a lot of control over either of those. It's very hard to hold those folks accountable, right, on the state level and the federal level. On the local level, a person can and has won by as little as 11 votes. And that's the difference when you're talking about your vote counting, right? In your local elections, it absolutely counts. Literally, you could be the one vote. If it goes to a runoff, let's say we go to a runoff, right? Well, in the runoff, it's just whoever gets more votes. So if we go to a runoff and one person got one other vote past the other person, they win. That's how much it counts, how much of an impact your vote has at the local level. Now, the other thing I'll say is, we can't say that we've tried voting. We can't say that. I just gave you the numbers. We haven't been doing that. So if people say, oh, well, we tried that. No, we haven't. So if you're going to continue to try to do the same thing and expect different results, I think that's called insanity, right? And we've been trying the same thing, which is nothing. So at this point, it would make common sense that if you just try it, you're probably going to have an impact, right? So or at least some different outcome. Okay.
Yeah, 10% might change.
Exactly. And so as far as how embarrassingly low this is and why we stay in the places we're at, Parkway is in East Lubbock. I grew up in East Lubbock. Parkway, Cherry Point is in East Lubbock. And in that voting district, and it's just one I have at the top of my head that I know the numbers. So in the last May election, there was over 1,200 registered voters in that voting precinct. 76 showed up.
Jesus.
It's so out of whack. Meanwhile, that 10% that has been picking for everybody, they're in 2 districts and they show up at 90% every single time without fail. And so we have to go the other way, right? And then also you can hold your local leaders accountable a lot easier than you can your state officials. Like, let's just say you get a council person and then or a mayor, and they're just whacked out, right? And you're like, oh wow, like this person has to go. You can do a recall. You can recall that person. We can't recall the president, right? Like, I don't like this president. Let's recall him, like, right? We can't do that. You can't even do that with your state reps or your governor. But if your mayor's messing up that bad or your council person's messing up that bad, you can get a number of signatures and get them out of there.
Yeah, and we also probably would never be able to do a podcast with the governor or the president of the United States.
Right.
We can get you and probably some counsel. It's actually up to them because I've reached out. It's actually up to them if they want to come on. Yeah, it's
for sure.
Right there. That was one of the questions was, if you get elected, are you going to come back on the podcast?
Of course.
I want to do one with the mayor.
Yes, of course. Nothing changes. And that's what, it's the same with my community service. Like, I don't stop showing up to OL Slayton Middle School every week just because I'm the mayor, right? Like, that work to me is more important than anything, whether I'm mayor or if I was president. Like, that work is more important than any of that, right? So, like, none of it stops. Yeah, of course.
We'll come back with more questions. I have to use the restroom and figure out why this dog is crying.
All right.
But I came under a lot of fire. Yeah, and that podcast, it hasn't even dropped yet. You know what I mean?
No, it hasn't. I was going to drop them back to back.
I have had so much just blowback from that.
Really?
Yes, and it hasn't even dropped. And so it's like I said, whenever I found out that Tony was coming on last week, I did what I did with yours. Like ask me questions, whatever. And I got a lot of good questions, but besides that, I got more replies to my story making fun of the guy, and I was just kind of like, okay, well, I mean, if you don't have a question, I mean, whatever. And so the next day after the podcast, we posted a picture, and I ended up sharing the picture, and I had said, you know what, although we went toe to toe and we disagreed, I respect the guy, because at the end of the day, he loves the city, and I have to respect anybody who just, loves their city like that. You know what I mean? And I immediately lost followers, and then I immediately was like, sent like a spam mail bond. So I was signed up for like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of like newsletters and random websites. And so somebody did that to me recently. I don't know. And I'm like, you guys haven't even heard the episode. And I'm in defense of a lot of things, in opposition of a lot of things. But I'm assuming because I wasn't just completely intolerant and completely like closed to the conversation, and I still saw eye to eye with him, even though I completely disagreed on things. I guess I was supposed to be intolerant completely, but I feel like that makes this platform a toxic place if we do that.
Yeah, and it's not helpful.
It's not, and I feel like we can't call ourselves podcasters if we are going to be like, you can come on, but you can only talk about these things, and you can only agree with us on this. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's just, if I felt he was an actual aggressive, toxic person, I might have been less tolerant of some of these things, but I mean, what can you do? That's what we sign up for when we have these conversations. You're not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but that's also kind of part of how you gain knowledge and empathy for people, is you just hear where they came from, how they became who they came, and you just agree to disagree and you move on with your life. And that's just how you just get a better read on people off of these things.
There's just a lot of...
I was very surprised by just the blowback of it.
And as it come out.
And even after the pod, Jen was like, "I'm sorry," and I'm like, "No, Jen, you did great. Like, if anything,
I felt so bad.
No, like Jen did a great job, and but we know so many people who are very outspoken and have a lot of concerns about things, but I don't know. I just feel like there's and it's on both sides. It's even if you're liberal or conservative, if you say, "Oh, I talked to this person," or "I'm friends with this person," but they have an opposite view, and it's like, well, they want to shun you because you talk to that person, and it's like, it doesn't go anywhere. You can't get things done if you have that mentality,
Right?
And it kind of hurts me, they probably gone the more, backlash, I guess you could say, but it's, if you call it that, but it's just like, I feel like we have to talk to as many people as we possibly can.
How else are you going to get the information?
You and him were the only ones that said you would come on, so
cool.
You know what I mean? So we're gonna talk.
Yeah, and we're gonna welcome anybody and treat anybody with respect that is going to sit across from us and look us in the eye and talk to us. Like we have to make this a safe place for anybody, even if we completely disagree with you. You know what I mean? You are coming alone into this studio to talk to us and tell us your testimonies or your story or why you believe in what you believe in. So it's just like, I don't know. There's levels to these things, but it was very disappointing of the pushback that we got for not being intolerant. And it's almost like, how is change supposed to be enacted when you're just like, nope, I refuse. No. You know what I mean? It's just, you want to shove so many things in our faces, but you can't just, you can't take it either. It bummed me out.
Yeah.
It bummed me out. But those are the people that will post that nothing changes, that will post that voting doesn't work, that will post that our government is, excuse my language, fucks or whatever. But it is less effort for them to sign me up for hundreds of spam emails than for them to go vote. If that is how,
doesn't exist.
If that's how you stand on business,
Not right.
God bless you.
Yeah.
God bless
So
you.
how do you? I know I asked that earlier, but how do you deal with that? I'm sure you deal with it.
Oh yeah. I mean,
Ignorance and just.
Do you just kind of have to just kind of like, okay, well, that's
I
just how
mean,
you
at
are.
a certain
Can you put a
point,
number to it to being people like that to actual hatred? Have you dealt with actual hatred before?
at this point, it's getting. I mean, I don't even know that I call it hatred because these people don't know me, right?
Yeah.
Like the first sign to me that somebody doesn't know me at all or has never met me or isn't aware of anything that I do. I'm a very public person. I'm all over the city all the time. Like, so much of my life is public. I get the least amount of time is to myself. So it's all out there. I'm not shy about it. I put what I state, where I stand on things all the time. I make public comments all the time, right? Like, I got a weekly live stream where you can see me talk about my ideas and what I think about and what I feel. So when somebody comes out of the blue and says something just like completely counter to who I am or what I actually do, like, I mean, in my mind, and I've been this way probably my whole life, like, I can't worry about that, right?
Yeah.
Like, whatever your perception of me is because somebody told you something, or maybe you don't like my hair, or he's got a tattoo on his hand, or his skin's too dark, or he's
You
from
and
the
I both, brother.
right, he's wrong he's from the wrong part of town, or whatever, or he's for marijuana, he's got to be bad, right? Like, all of those different things, whatever it is that you feel you need to throw at me, like, it doesn't have as much to do with me as it has to do with you, right? And so I wouldn't call it hate, but the other candidates have their supporters, and I understand that. I have empathy for them, right? Like, there's people that support me that are saying stuff online. I'm like, I wish you wouldn't, like
Don't say that.
right? Like, don't say that. Don't do that. Like, please don't do that on my behalf, right? But I mean, you can't control what people do, right? Like, I can't control what people are saying on my behalf, just like they can't. And so, are they having conversations to the side and saying, go say this? I don't think so, right? Like, I think it's just people that support them and maybe have the same ideologies, right? And all of those sort of things. So just to be completely honest, I don't deal with it. Like, if somebody has a question, or if they say something, if they have a question, right, a direct question, no matter how off base it is or whatever, like, I'll try to answer it to the best of my ability, to let them know what I'm thinking. And then at whatever point we disagree, like, I'm totally cool with disagreeing. And I'll just tell them, like, we disagree. Like, that's cool, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to continue to just, like, drag the argument out, right? But, like, when you get to, like, the really crazy stuff where they're just, like, taking shots or whatever, I'm like, it's none of my business.
Yeah, and I guess that is politics, but it's like, I guess you do have to have that attitude of, like, what you think of me is not my business. You know what I mean? Like, you just can't focus on it. And it's like with that quote that was shared about you, about, like, he's just, the other Latino candidate wants to legalize marijuana. It's like you said, like, Freedom Act is one blip in the list of work that you've done and put out there.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just like, if you're just going to focus on the blip of one successful thing I've done, then okay, whatever.
Yeah.
You guys are having a debate?
Apparently, yeah. So normally, I was surprised because normally these are like forums.
Yeah.
And we actually wanted to debate last time, and I was more interested in it last time, to be honest, because there was actual things that I felt like that needed to be discussed in that sense. In this race, like when I saw, so first of all, I got contacted for that debate, and maybe I heard him wrong, maybe I wasn't paying attention. He might have said debate. I guess I just missed that part. So then when they sent the flyer and I saw a mayoral debate, I'm like, I don't really have anything to debate them about, right? Like, I've got things I want to do that are not my. All this stuff is not my own. The dog issue isn't something that I just came up with and said Adam Hernandez wants to fix dogs just for Adam Hernandez, right? Like, these are things I deal with thousands of people across the city, right? Like, all the time. And this is the feedback I get from them, the things that they want, the things that are important to them, the things that are impacting them, right? And so in my mind, my only task that I'm doing is figuring out how to take those needs, those issues, and figure out, which is my job, right? That's not the community's job. Their job is to tell me what the issues are, right? And to bring my awareness to those. And then my job is to do something about it, right? So what I do is I go and try to figure out, all right, what can be done from a policy perspective, and how do you get that done? And then I just try to connect the dots between those two things.
So there's nothing to debate.
So there's nothing really for me. Unless they want to debate me on a thought I have or a plan I have, okay. But I don't necessarily, I don't know what their platforms are really to have a problem with it, I guess. So I don't know. But interesting. Yeah, I guess we're having a debate. I don't know how that would go.
What is something that you've learned since the last campaign? I mean, what are some things you've done different compared to this last time?
Yeah, that's a great question, because the first time obviously was my first time running for anything, my first experience. I was literally building the plane as I was flying it in the beginning, because I didn't know how to do any of this stuff. And I had a campaign manager way late in the game last time, right? So we learned a whole lot just under fire that last time. And not only me, but my team learned a whole lot. And so there's a bunch that we've learned from a strategy standpoint and from a technical standpoint, and all those sorts of things. But I guess me personally, I had an idea last time that, with most people, if you had a discussion, right, if you had an open discussion and you presented your ideas and you could get to a point to where things made sense and there was something that could be moved forward with, that you would get everybody's buy-in, right? Or the other idea I had was if somebody, for the most part, if somebody considers themselves a conservative, Republican or whatever, I felt like more of them made decisions outside of their party, right? I didn't know that it was so tied to the party. So for instance, if there's two candidates, right, and one's an independent and one says they're a Republican or whatever, the Republicans' policy is not good. That's not what you want. And maybe the independent person's policy, you're like, yeah, that sounds good. That'll work. But I'm not going to vote for them because they don't have an R by their name, right? I underestimated the role that plays for a lot of people. And so learning to sort of move on faster when I realize who I'm engaging, because there's certain people, like you said, you're not going to change their mind, right? Yeah. And so the main thing, the key takeaway that we learned from all of it was whoever shows up to vote is going to vote. We have to focus on those people who don't normally show up and who have never voted at all, and try to reach them. And that's where our focus has been. And we're doing that in a bunch of different ways. We've got events going on, we're out in the public still all over the place.
I still see you guys, well, at least for Freedom Act, I still see everybody out for at First Friday and stuff. And even if that's the movement that causes people to go vote, that speaks volumes.
And we're in two places at First Friday. So
Really?
I have my mayor table is at Rock Paper Shears, and so I'm there. And then the team was at while I was at Rock Paper Shears this last time, the team was out by Two Docks
That's
with
where I
the
saw
Freedom
them
Act
last
table.
month.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
So this was brought up the last podcast, the one we did with Tony. You always hear that the city's in debt. One big concern it seems like he had is we're having trouble with law enforcement keeping those jobs here. A lot of times they tend to go to other markets for better pay.
Yep.
How come? Like, what are some ways that we could do to help maintain, or keep cops here, or to come here where, because you always hear about it, like there's unanswered calls with 911. Like, how do you prevent that or, keep that from happening?
Yeah, so a couple of things here, and I know I keep saying that, but there's with a lot of these issues, there's multiple things happening, right? And so it's not just with our police officers, it's also with our firefighters, but it's not just with our first responders, it's also with departments across the city. We have a real issue that we need to address when it comes to how we pay people at the city in terms of what they make. We need to take a look at how often do they get raises, because they don't get yearly raises for cost of living. There's people that haven't had a raise in 12 years that work for the city. Yeah. And so could you imagine going to work every day, 40 hours a week for 12 years, and the only thing you get out of it is seeing your check get smaller and smaller and smaller every year, because inflation is going to happen.
Yeah.
It's going to happen, right? So we have to look at that. We've got to look at the culture of the city, right? I spend a lot of time around City Hall. I spend a lot of time around city staff. I hear things. People tell me things. We have a culture issue in a lot of departments at the city of Lubbock. So I've been a GM in my life of 2 restaurants, and they had $1 million budgets. I had dozens of employees, the whole situation, right? And 2 things that I learned from that were, if you can't get people in the door, your proposition sucks. You're not paying enough for how hard the job is, or you're just not paying enough, period. Benefits suck, whatever, right? Something about your offer is not good if you can't get people in the door. Now, if you can get people in the door, but you can't keep them, then there's 9 times out of 10 a culture problem. That means that maybe management is not enforcing rules equally amongst everybody. Maybe they got favorites. Maybe it's demanding too much of your employees, or making a toxic environment, or not, if somebody happens to be somebody who is gay or whatever, and you don't like that or whatever, right? Like, all of these sorts of things can cause somebody to be like, I'm out. I don't want to deal with this, right? Like, and so we have to really look at those things. Now, in the terms of our first responders in particular, the city council in 2006 actually passed a resolution that said that the city was promising that they were going to keep our first responders in the top 10 rate of pay at the state level, the top 10 of the state. And we have not honored that since 2006. And they got a raise last year from the ARPA funds, and that was the first time since 2006 when they made that promise, and it didn't even get them anywhere near that top 10 rate. And so, like a lot of things, when we kick these things down the road, now we have a much more expensive problem that's a little harder to fix. So how do we fix it? How do we get that corrected? And so what we do is there is a thing that you can do between first responders in particular and a city, and it's called meet and confer. And what that is essentially a contract. So you have a representative from the police association, you have a representative from the fire association, and you have a representative from the city. They come together, they make an agreement, and if they don't agree, nothing changes. But if they agree, it's binding. And so they can negotiate things like pay and benefits and things like that. Because of the promises that have been broken in the past, and every time the city says we're going to make a down payment on it and get better, it hasn't worked out. We need something binding. So we need that meet and confer so that we can say, okay, we're going to start by investing this much, because we do have to look realistically at what money do we have right now, right? Like, so we may not have enough to get them to that top 10, but what do we have? But you have to have it binding so that when you make that first payment, the next payments come, right? Until you get them to that top 10 salary range.
Do you have any comments on, I can't remember if it's passed or it might be passed, about the plumbing and the alleyways? Has that been passed?
So let me give you the timeline. Okay. All right. Back in October, Lubbock Compact was in that city council meeting when they passed that. And we actually talked about it on Lubbock Compact Live that next day. And so when you look at a city council meeting, so there's some issues that I'm just going to like sort of go through the timeline and explain the issues along the way. The first issue is that when we got to that council meeting and I looked at the agenda and I saw that on the agenda, it was in the consent agenda. So the city council meetings have two parts. There's the consent agenda and the regular agenda. And the consent agenda is supposed to be for just like routine stuff, right? Like we're going to pay a bill, we're going to get this person to mow this yard, whatever, right? Like just routine stuff is supposed to be in there because they passed that all with one vote with no discussion, right? It's not supposed to be super heavy stuff in there that's going to like mess people's life up. And so they put this sewer alley repair thing in there in the consent agenda and passed it with no discussion. And we were worried about that and said, this is not a workable policy. Also, they passed it in a consent agenda. This is not cool, right? Well, the policy didn't actually go into effect until January. And for those who don't know what I'm talking about, what happened was prior to them changing this rule, let's say your sewer line backed up in your backyard. Now, you've always been responsible for what was inside your backyard. So if something was stuck in your pipe in the inside of your backyard, you're paying for that. That's it, right? And so what you would do is your sewer's backed up. You're going to call a plumber out. They're going to run a camera through there. And a lot of times it's not in your property. It's past the property line in the alley in what's called the lateral line. It's that last 5 feet of your sewer line that goes down to the main line. All right, so when the plumber would get there, before this law changed, when the plumber would get there, they'd call the city because it was on the city to repair that because it's in the alley, right? And we know that the city says it owns the alley, right? Like that's theirs. We can't do a lot of different things in the alley. So you can't change the rules about one part and not about the rest of it, right? Because if we're going to do this, I heard some people, and it's funny, but it's also true. They're saying, okay, well, if it's my alley, I'm going to put a garden back there, right? Like, if we're going that route, like that's sort of how it plays out, right? Oh. And so, and that's an extreme, but still, right? Like it's supposed to be the city's responsibility. And their excuse was, well, it used to not be like that many years back. That doesn't really matter. The reasoning behind it that was given was that the city, they only have so many people on their crews that do these things, right? And so they were in a situation where they had too many repairs for the crews that they had. And so they had like 3 crews just tied up every month doing just those repairs and nothing else. And they needed to do other things, right? And so instead of hiring more people, their idea was, well, let's just put this repair on the homeowner, on the property owner, right? Now, the thing about that is that, again, I explained that we have a lot of people in the poverty level. We have a lot of people that don't have a lot of disposable income, even if they got a decent job. So let's say on the low end, which is, I've not heard this estimate from anybody else, but if you talk to some people at the city, they said, well, that last 5 feet is supposed to cost about $500 to $1,000 to fix. Most people in this city don't have $500 to $1,000 to spend. Now, what the reality is people are getting charged anywhere from $9,000 to $15,000 for that last 5 feet because of the way you got to dig. You got to make a huge trench around that pipe, and when that pipe comes out from your property line, it goes like almost straight down. Yeah. And it could be 5 feet down there, it could be 12 feet down there. It depends. And so they have to dig a whole trench, and they have to like shore up that trench so that it doesn't collapse on them while they're working, and they have to have enough room to work, and it's like all this special equipment, all these different things, very expensive. And so not one of the council people in those meetings asked how much this was going to cost the homeowners. Not one. And that was another thing that we had an issue with when we reported it. It was like nobody even asked how much this is going to cost, right? Well, it went into effect into January, and the first lady that had an issue with it ended up on the news. And then they did another story where another lady ended up on the news. So I actually thought that more people knew about it than actually knew about it. And I had a plan to address it, right, to fix it. And so I just asked the question, like, what do people think about it? Well, I didn't know that I was breaking the news to a lot of people. So that went like super viral on everything.
Yeah.
On Facebook, Instagram, Nextdoor, everything. It just went super viral. And I was like, oh, okay. And so then the next day I posted my plan to fix it. Now, what happened was when the first lady ended up on the news, they interviewed Mark McBrayer, and they interviewed Steve Massengale. And these guys are both running for mayor now. And when they asked him, did you ask how much this was going to cost homeowners? Steve Massengale was just like, well, I just stand by the decision. That was his response. And then Mark McBrayer was like, no, I didn't ask. And so that was that, right? Yeah. Well, then the second news story comes out. I make my post. Now it becomes a big thing. When my post started going viral, people all across the different socials started asking me, okay, what can we do about this? And I said, well, I can't do anything about it right now, but you can email your council person and tell them you want to change this. Tell them you want to change it, and tell them you want a solution that addresses the city's side of the problem, but also doesn't put it on the homeowner. That's what you can tell them. And I gave them all of the emails to the city council, and people did that, right? And they got a bunch of feedback. So I also got feedback. And so what my original proposal was, because they told me that in that city council meeting, they said the numbers of those repairs that they were seeing was a lot lower than the second call I got. And so when my proposal started going viral and people liked it and they were like, yeah, this sounds good. Then I got a call from one of the people at the city that works in public works. And he said, hey, Adam, I just wanted you to know this problem is a little bigger than what you're proposing. And I was like, well, I'm just going by the numbers that y'all said at the beginning. Well, how big is the need? So it's really, instead of one crew like I thought it would have been in the beginning, it's actually 3 crews that we need to hire. And so you look at, what does that cost to the city? So one of these crews, you have to have 5 people on the crew, and they're going to make about $40,000 a year. So you got about $200,000 in salary per year for this crew. And then each crew has to have this trailer that's a really special setup with like a lot of special equipment on it. That's like $800,000. So you got like $1 million per crew, right? So you're looking at $3 million per year on the city's budget. Now, when you're talking about $1 billion budget for our city, that's nothing. That's literally nothing, yeah. Right? It sounds a lot to us because we don't have $3 million in our bank account, but to a city, that's nothing, yeah. Right? Now, the city has $3 million a year to spend on that. Most homeowners don't have the money to repair that. And so when that happened, when it started going viral and people were sharing my proposal around and I got the call, when I was on that same call, he told me, well, I guess you heard that this is going back to the council. I said, no, I hadn't heard that. And so he told me it was going back to the council after spring break because now the 2 guys that originally stood by it or didn't ask, now they want to bring it back up to the council because they've gotten all this feedback from the citizens. And so I'm pretty sure they're going to take it up on March 26th city council meeting. If I had to bet, if I was a betting person, I would bet they're going to take it up then and change it.
Yeah, I hate to keep bringing back the other podcast. He said it was probably because they're both running for mayor, like you know, and 2 of the city council guys spots are open for in this next election.
Yeah,
so he's like,
I mean,
that's probably.
All I can say is
that, me.
Right. They were standing by it at first, and now they're not, and it's an election time. That's all I can say.
Yeah. And let's see. I had another one.
Did you end up thinking of a song or quote to live by?
Oh man, song or quote to live by. Oh, you know, a song I like this song a lot that I think to live by. It's J. Cole. It's called "Better Than Yours." There's no such thing as a life that's better than yours. Oh, yeah. And I guess that would be the quote, right?
Okay. There you go.
There's no such thing as a life that's better than yours, right? Because a lot of times we think that because this person does this or that, or they have this title or that title, like they somehow have it better, right? Like what they have their own struggles, they have their own things they have to deal with, right?
Yeah.
And what they like and what they find joy in may not be the same things you do, right? So like, I think that's a pretty good quote.
It is. My sister's been listening to J. Cole, so we'll get on that one. Let's see, Mr. Hernandez, in your candidacy for mayor of Lubbock, how do you view grassroots initiatives like ADAF Forward, initiated by local residents? Furthermore, could you elaborate on your belief in the importance of collective community involvement in driving genuine and enduring change?
Yeah, great question. So as far as citizen organizations, obviously I started one, right? Lubbock Compact I was a co-founder of that, and it's a citizen organization, and it was to do things locally, right? To make change locally. So I'm all for that. I think the more people that we have involved in doing these things, the better, right? Now, in terms of, and we do have a lot of ADA issues across the city.
What is this?
So ADA compliance means for people with disabilities. So people in wheelchairs or that have to get around different ways. You need to set your environments up for them to be able to use, right? Like there's certain ways that you need to do your sidewalks, and this is why buildings have to have the ramp out in front and all those sorts of things, right? And so for any issue, I think that citizen organizations are a good thing. Now, in terms of collaboration, we sort of talked about it a little bit here, right? Like when you're talking about the number of people that live in a city, you couldn't even get 20 people in a room and get them all to agree on everything, right? You're never going to agree on everything. But even though you don't agree, that person you don't agree with might have some perspective that you don't. Maybe they saw some angle that you didn't, right? And just because you disagree doesn't mean they care any less, right? And so it's all coming from a place of caring. And so they may have something to contribute to that conversation that helps it move along better, right? And so I'm a firm believer in that, right? Now, if it starts to break down, like you said, and somebody's just irate and like all that doesn't help anybody either.
Right.
But if we're just disagreeing like cordially, like it's totally fine.
Yeah.
Right? Let's try to make the sort of best path for the most people, because you're not going to make everybody happy, right?
Right.
And so that's part of it. And then I guess the only thing I'll say outside of that is that I don't look at local government as the lowest level in the hierarchy of a government. I look at local government as the highest level of collaboration in the community. And so our city council should be openly and actively collaborating with the community, because that's who you're serving. That's who these policies are impacting.
True. Got any other questions?
You've answered most of them.
Mm-hmm.
I got one, like a few
go
more,
ahead.
because I just wanted. So you said the city budget's $1 billion.
Mm-hmm.
Where is this money coming from? I don't even know.
Yeah, great question. So a city gets money in a few ways. So the first one would be property taxes, and those can be different depending on if it's a house or if it's a business, right? Like, so there's different property taxes, but you get property taxes from every property that's in a city, and then you have sales tax, right? So your property tax and your sales tax, mostly all of that go to pay for your city services. And then anything else is really sort of funded by fees. So different fees that the city may have. They have building permit fees. They got park rental fees. They've got all these different fees, right? Depending on what you're doing. And so that's another funding source for the city. And as the city grows, the budget just gets bigger and bigger, because you got more property, you got more people paying sales tax, and et cetera. And so you also have debt. Right, so you have some amount of that is your debt service. So it's debt that you've taken out. It's just like anything that you have that's a bill, right, that you're paying down. You have that sitting there, right, and you pay it down over time or whatever. And so part of that is that too.
Have you seen the budget, like, for yourself?
Oh yeah.
So how much revenue do we get in one day? Can you?
I haven't seen it on that level, but yeah, they do the budget session every year, and we've been involved in several. So a lot of our advocacy has happened in the budget session. So when we advocated for the neighborhood planner position to be created and for money to do the plans, that was during a budget session. And so there's different things, but yeah, budget session happens every year. The city's very open about it. You can go at any time on the city website and get all of these documents. If you wanted to just go and look through the budget and what they present, it's all up there.
May 4th, they can go and vote for you.
May 4th is election day. Early voting is April 22nd through the 30th. I say everybody needs to get registered to vote before March
22nd?
Before the 22nd. You got about 4 more days, so that way you can participate in early voting. And the reason why I'm such an advocate for early voting, this is another thing, and I'm glad you brought this up, because I want to also talk about a couple of tips for people, because a lot of people may not have ever voted, right? And so I get it. It can be intimidating, and maybe some of these things you don't know. I know people who have voted their whole lives that didn't know some of these things until I told them the other day. So During early voting, you can vote at any United supermarket from, I think it's 8 to 8. And every day, except for Sunday, it's like it's open a little shorter amount of time, but you can go every day during early voting. It should be about 10 to 12 days, something like that. And it's very fast. And also, you're probably already going to be at United at some point. Like, just go in there, get it done, be in and out, right? Because on election day, it's all different places, and it's none of the Uniteds. So it gets very confusing.
Early voting, as long as you're registered, you can go.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then on election day, it's all different places. It could be a church. It could be a community center. It could be a school gym. It could be like different places, right? And so the tips I want to tell everybody is that's first and foremost. Just go to make it easy on yourself. Go to early voting. But if you have to go on election day, so be it. But when you go to vote, a lot of people are like, well, like, yeah, maybe I've heard of Adam, he's running for mayor, or I've heard of Freedom Act and I want to vote for those things, but I don't know all these other people. I don't have time to research these people. I got to work, right? I got to go to school or whatever, right? Like, I got kids. I can't look at all these people and look them up in time. You don't have to vote for everything on the ballot. You can go in there and vote for one or two things and leave the rest blank and walk out.
I learned that last time when you came, when you walked us through that.
Yeah. And then
because I would just bloop, bloop, bloop.
So I voted for the primary this last time, and I gave it a test run. And yeah, you can hit next, and it won't come off.
Yeah. And then the last tip that I'll give, because a lot of people get worried, and I get it. I'm not knocking anybody. I get it. I totally get it. But a lot of people get worried because they're like, oh, I don't want somebody to know who I voted for or what I voted for, right? Like, let's say somebody wants to vote for Freedom Act, but they're like, oh, man, my job's going to see it. Nobody's going to see what you voted for. Like, if they even have access, which very few people have access to even see if you voted. But if somebody has access, all they're going to see is that you voted in that election. They're not going to see, oh, this person voted for all this stuff. Like, they can't tell what you voted for. That includes your parents. That includes anybody that you're worried about being mad at you for voting a certain way. If you know in your heart you want to vote a certain way, do that. Because the thing that sort of like crushed my soul when I was working during early voting at one of the polling places was seeing these young people come in, especially young women, and going in there and voting against all their interests because mom or dad would have been mad at them, right? And they didn't know that they wouldn't have known. You could have went home and told them, yeah, I voted for whoever you want, whatever, right? Like, but they wouldn't have known what you voted for. Mm-hmm. And so that's something that I think a lot of people should know.
Wow. Is it true that, because one thing I always hear why people don't vote is, oh, that's how you get called into jury duty. Is that true? Is that
it's
even?
Not. No,
okay.
No, it's not. Yeah, it's not.
Last time I got called, I was in college. Thank God.
Don't let the fear of jury duty sway you from voting.
Right. Also, you get paid for jury duty, so there's
I'm
that.
like, I think you get paid like $7 an hour or something. So,
So what day will we know the official results?
Ooh, I don't remember.
Oh.
I don't remember because they got to count them. I think we knew that night that who won, but I don't know that it's finalized until like maybe a day or two. I don't know. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But it's pretty quick is all I'm saying. Yeah.
Well, best of luck to you, man. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Thanks for all the great questions.
My final question is, do you believe in aliens?
I do, yes.
Have you seen one?
Do you believe in
I have
ghosts?
not believed in aliens. You know, I have a hard time believing in ghosts. So aliens, you know, we see stuff flying around all the time. We've seen that for years, right? But like we've never seen them get out. Like that's my beef with my beef with the aliens. Is like come and say something. Like at this point,
like come away. Why are you cruising around here?
I wanted to do a service to the people and be serious, but we've seen some things floating over this city. I'm telling you, if we can show you the videos,
right?
God damn,
right. And so now the reason why I have a hard time believing in ghosts because I have never seen. I've never seen anything that made me think that I've never seen anything where I thought it was a ghost. So.
We've seen those in his garage.
Okay.
If you go to Lubbock Cemetery,
Adam's like, "Is it over? Are we done?"
If you go to Lubbock Cemetery at night, you see some things.
All right, Bradley, you got anything else, man?
Go vote.
Yep.
Yep.
Jen?
Go vote. It takes less effort than you signing me up for email spam lists.
And it won't send you the jury duty. Sorry.
I know. You can follow me at Hellasoft. You can follow me at Texas Chainsaw Alchemist. This will have dropped after our drive screening, but come see our screening of Lords of Chaos April 24th. We're going to be collaborating, of course, with Dirty South 8 to 6 Collective, and also Taste Buds Food Truck. Simone's going to be whipping up some curated dishes for our film that night. So please, please, please come see that.
When are you announcing that? 'Cause this
Probably
can be
by
out-
the time this drops,
gonna be out
that'll
next
have
week.
already been announced.
I'm dropping both
Yeah.
of these next week.
If you guys are still listening at this point, good. I'm putting it on game. I'm announcing it before we have a flyer made.
Here you go.
Woo!
Patreon.com/SnakePit Studios. If you're new to this podcast, please hit that subscribe button. Thank you, and hope you're mayor, and I hope we see you again. We get to interview you as mayor next time.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, and either way, just thank you for the work that you do put in, and just for having compassion for our community.
All right.
Win
thank
or
you.
lose, thank
That
you.
and thanks for being very informal too, because I've learned a lot these last 2 podcasts.
Yes,
So
truly.
Cool. Awesome.
See you guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.